Welcome to the TalkBlock Show special series. Here on the show today, we are launching an exclusive cycle of episodes dedicated to uncovering a transformative framework for understanding human behavior, Septemics. In this multi-part journey, I'm joined by the developer of the system himself, Jim Marshall. Together, we will be taking a deep dive into his groundbreaking book, Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena, breaking down its various scales of human behavior and providing a comprehensive, practical look into how these natural phenomena govern our daily lives. Whether you are looking to gain sharper self-awareness, improve your relationships, or simply understand the hidden mechanics behind human actions and dynamics, this series is designed to equip you with a whole new lens for seeing the world. So sit back, tune in, and join us as we begin our full exploration into the world of Septemics with Jim Marshall. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Fadi. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Okay, so here we have on the screen Septemics. So, Jim, I give you a word.
Okay.
What do we see? What do we see in here?
Okay. All right. Well, you are looking at the Septemics logo. This actually tells you quite a bit about what Septemics is.
Yeah. It's like seven-ray star or something?
Right. Septemics comes from the Latin word septem, which means seven.
Right.
Because there are 35 septemic scales, and each of them has 7 levels. So this is a 7-ray star. Each ray points in a different direction and is a different color. But between them, they give you a full spectrum, which is what you get from Septemics. As you see, you go around, just like the rainbow, you come back to the original color again. So that tells you a lot about what this is and how it works. So the subtitle is Analysis, Prediction, and Management of Human Affairs. So that's what I'm going to be teaching you. How to analyze and consequently predict and then consequently manage human affairs in your life as it suits you, as it befits your condition. So let's go to the next.
This slide?
Yeah, that's it. Okay, so it says individual scales because there are 35 septemic scales, each of which is unique. Now, among the 35, 24 of them are individual scales, meaning they apply primarily to an individual, and 11 of them are group scales. So in the book, first it covers the individual scales. So we're going to go to the first individual scale. So go to the next. There we go. This is a very important scale, probably the most important in the book. This is the scale of basic purposes, and we can't really see the top of it, which is unfortunate because the title is missing from the screen. But I don't know
Maybe
that
I can make it.
be done about that. Can you widen it out? There you go. Scale of basic purposes.
Yeah.
Now, think about this. What could possibly be more important to know about a person than that person's basic purpose? It's what the person is trying to do all the time, whether he succeeds or not. This is a very fundamental thing. And when you know someone's basic purpose, you really understand the person in a deep way.
Right.
I should also explain, this is what I call a persistent trait, meaning it's not easy to change on this scale. Most humans, and when I say most, probably more than 90%, spend an entire lifetime at one level of this scale. So if a person is at level 4 and you don't see him for 30 years, you see him 30 years later, he's still at level 4. That is extremely likely. And there are particular technical reasons for this, which are discussed in the chapter. You have to bring a enormous change into the person's life to get him to change on this scale. Now, in the case of advancing, this would be some spectacular, transformational, uplifting experience. But in the case of going down, there would be some horrible trauma. Like, for example, if somebody is in a Nazi concentration camp but lives, when he comes out, he's probably going to be a level lower than he was when he went in. And you hear this all the time about somebody who comes out of prison. They say, boy, Joe is not the same person he used to be. Well, yeah, he went down a level. So that's when you would see a change. Now, notice it says type, linear, quantum, gradual. So every scale, every one of these 35 scales is either linear or spiral. Now, in a linear scale, it's exactly what you would expect. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But in a spiral scale, which does not apply here, you get an overlap between 1 and 7. In other words, there is an apparent congruency between level 1 and 7. That doesn't apply here, but it will in other scales that we'll get to soon. Then this is quantum. What that means is you are either at level 3 or you're at level 2. There's nothing in between. It's like intergalactic space. There's nothing there. There is no gradation. So here's the way this would manifest. Let's say you have a guy who goes into therapy with a very good psychologist for a couple of years. Well, he might have a day when he comes in and he has this big spectacular change and says, I figured it all out and I feel much better and it's the best day of my life and things like that. Well, he probably went up a level on some scale, maybe this one. But you have to realize, while he was in therapy, he may have had 100 therapy sessions. He's at level 3, level 3, level 3, level 3, and then he comes in, he's at level 2. You see, there's no gradation. Now, the work was being done. That's what you have to understand. The work is being done. And you don't see the benefit until it clicks and he gets this big epiphany and he jumps up to the next level. And then his whole personality changes. Now, let me just go through the names of the 7 levels, starting from the bottom: subversive, criminal, loser, normal, winner, leader, saint. Now notice, next to each of these words it's hard to see because it's small, there's a plus or a minus. Next to the saint in that bracket there, that is a minus sign. And next to the leader is a plus sign. So what you get on this scale is minus, plus, minus, plus, minus, plus, minus, plus, minus. And let me tell you, that does not mean good or bad. It does not mean add or subtract. It means inflow or outflow. Now, in the material world, this is easy to see, like the water flows into the bathtub, and then it flows out of the bathtub. Or the blood comes into your heart, and it goes out of your heart. It's an inflow and an outflow. And life is just full of that. Anything that's living is basically inflowing and outflowing. However, when you were talking about behavior or human phenomena, it makes more sense to say reach or withdraw. In other words, when you reach for something, that's an outflow. And when you withdraw from something, that's an inflow. So let's say you accidentally touch the stove, right? And you reflexively pull your hand back or you're withdrawing from the stove. Or the opposite, let's say you're in a room and some beautiful woman walks into the room, and even though you don't say anything, there's sort of an outflow where you sort of are paying attention to her. See, you're reaching toward her. So All you can do in life is reach or withdraw. You are either reaching or withdrawing. Now, if you're not reaching, withdrawing, you're not doing anything at all. It's possible, like if you're asleep, right? You're not reaching or
Right, right.
withdrawing. Although in your dreams you are. So that's what that's about. Now, this tells you a lot. For example, the saint is a withdrawal, or you could call it an inflow. The saint is withdrawing from the world. And that is why these people join monasteries, ashrams, nunneries, okay, religious orders. They withdraw from the world. They are seeking transcendence. Now, that is the objective that's stated there. And later we're going to come back to the different objectives and what they mean. But I just want you to know about the plus or minus, because this helps you to determine what level someone is at. There are people who, if you observe them, it's patently obvious that they are either inflowing or outflowing.
Right.
So, you know, the type of guy, he goes to a dance and he sits on the side and doesn't talk to anybody. Now, this is somebody who might become a priest. See,
Yeah.
he's withdrawing from the world. If you talk to this person, you know, what's important to you, he might even tell you that. Like the most famous example that people know about is St. Francis of Assisi, who founded the Franciscan order. You know, he was a saint. And he wanted to withdraw from the world. Now, he came from a rich family. He could have lived a life of luxury because his father was going to give him the business, which in those days is what happened. You had a son, you gave him the business.
Yeah.
And they were rich merchants. So, but he didn't want that. He didn't want the money. He didn't want anything like that. He wanted to transcend. And so he contributed by founding this Franciscan order, which is still around today. So that's about, you know, the reach and withdraw aspect of it. Or like, for example, a criminal, which is level 6. A criminal is outflowing, or you might say reaching. He reaches you with bullets, with brass knuckles, with clubs, with extortion. You see, it's an outflow. He's not withdrawn. Anybody who's withdrawing cannot be a criminal. How could you be a criminal? You know, the type of guy who sits there and he just does crossword puzzles. You know, he's not being a criminal. Criminals go out there with guns and take things. So they're outflowing. So this is a way to narrow it down. Look at the person. Is this guy inflowing or is this guy outflowing? And that is usually pretty easy to see if you spend enough time just looking at the person. You'll see. And now, if he is inflowing, that means he's either level 1, 3, 5, or 7. If he's outflowing, he's at 2, 4, or 6. So that's like a way to narrow this down. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, again, in a sense, you could say, if you want to talk about the mathematical aspect of it, that these are harmonics. In other words, level 1 is a harmonic of level 3. You see, because they're both inflowing. Level 5 is a harmonic of level 7. And so level 2 is a harmonic of level 4. For those of you who know science and what we mean by harmonics, harmonics are present in many, many different physical manifestations, including
So it
music.
means they somehow interconnected or what? Or
Well, certainly the way you think about it, they're interconnected. You know, like for example, if you look at a church organ, a old-fashioned church organ, right? It has something on it called stops. And so by using the stops, you can get harmonics of those pipes. See, the root, when you press the key C, you get a C. But you could press that key, and by using a stop, it will not give you a C, it will give you a G, which is harmonic of C. And that's true through all of music, and most musicians know this and use it. It's very widely used by guitarists because it's easy to create harmonics on guitar
Mm-hmm.
string. In fact, I was a professional guitarist, and I actually had a classical piece that I learned once. The whole song was just harmonics. In other words, I never pressed my finger on the string. I just stopped it at places, and you get different notes. But in a guitar, you have 6 different strings. So not only do you get the harmonics from one string, you get 6 sets of harmonics. So you can play a whole song on harmonics. So if you don't know what harmonics are, you can look it up or just let it go. But anyway, that's important for people who are interested in the mathematical aspect of this. Now, let's go to the objective, and we're going to start at level 7. The objective of the subversive is destruction. Now, a lot of people will say, well, why would that be someone's basic purpose? Well, the good news is there aren't too many of these people. But as you can see, there's a place there where a dividing line where it says social and antisocial at level 4. Well, the most antisocial of all is level 7. Well, what's antisocial? Destruction. That's as antisocial as you can get. So up from that is the criminal. Now, the criminal's objective is pleasure. So this is a person who he wants whatever he perceives as pleasure: drugs, alcohol, sex, food, and he has no qualms about getting it. See, the subversive will kill you just to kill you.
Yeah.
You know, there was a criminal in America in 1957 named Charles, I'm forgetting his last name. It's a famous case, 1957, where a guy got a rifle, and in 10 days he killed 12 people. Well, eventually the cops caught him. He confessed. He showed no remorse at all. If he didn't like the way you looked at him, he shot you. That was a destructive person, and he was put to death by the authorities who caught him. So that's a destructive. Now, the criminal is not like that. Now, you see this in organized crime. You see, organized crime is mostly populated by people at level 6. They're criminals. They don't particularly want to kill you. In fact, there are a lot of books about the mafia, movies and things like that. In the mafia, especially in the old-time mafia, meaning prior to 1980, you weren't allowed to kill people. You had to get permission if you wanted to kill somebody. And they were not quick to condemn anyone. They did not like to kill anyone. And there were categories of people who they might kill and categories of people who they would not kill. For example, if you were not involved in organized crime, you were considered a civilian. The rule was we don't kill civilians. It makes a lot of trouble. We don't care if you like him or don't like him, or he started a fight. You don't kill him because he's a civilian. Yeah. Now, if he's in organized crime, that's another thing. Those are the people, mostly the people they kill are other people who are in organized crime. So once in a while, and this is easy to find out on the internet or in books, they would get somebody in the mafia who was at level 7. He was destructive. That guy they would usually wind up killing because he was a liability. This is the type of guy who, if you got in an argument with him, he'd pull out his gun and kill you. You're not allowed to do that in the mafia. So somebody like that, they would get him in a room and put a bullet in his head. They did not want him because he caused trouble.
Yeah.
The people in the mafia are trying to make money. That is what they're about. They're criminals. Now, if they have to kill somebody, they will. But that's true for almost anybody. If somebody comes and breaks in my house in the middle of the night with a weapon, I'm going to shoot him. And that's legal in the United States. It's called castle law. If somebody comes in your house with that you don't know without your permission and threatens you, and you kill them, that's considered justifiable homicide. So almost anybody will kill somebody under the right circumstances, and obviously military and police, in a sense, are licensed to do that under certain circumstances. So, big difference between those two groups. Now, let's go up to number 5, the loser. The loser is not somebody who's doing badly. Anybody can do badly at any level. The loser is somebody who makes himself suffer. His objective is suffer. Now, that doesn't make sense to most people. People would say, well, why would that be somebody's basic purpose? Isn't that crazy? Yes, it's crazy. But it's not as crazy as the criminal, and the criminal is not as crazy as the suppressive. So you see, the further down you go, the crazier it gets. So the loser is somebody who makes himself suffer. Now, he could do it with drugs, alcohol, overeating, bad relationships. I had a client, wonderful person, successful person, with his own business, had a wife and 2 kids, and he had the misfortune of marrying a crazy woman. And he knew I did work, and I came in and did some work with him to sort of get him out of it. And after all the work, he was very happy with what we did, but he went back to her. Well, this was before I had Septemics. Then later on, I realized he was at level 5. There was no reason for him to go back to that woman. And when I say crazy, I mean crazy, crazy.
Yeah.
So, if he were not at that level, he would have said, okay, Jim, I'm going to get away from this. I'm going to get separated from her and get a divorce. That's what most people would do with a person like that. But he didn't, see, because he was at level 5. So if you have do-gooders, social workers, priests, people like Mother Teresa, who go around and help poor people, when they run into these people, they are frustrated because you cannot force someone to succeed if he intends to suffer. He's going to make himself suffer. Now, he may make himself suffer by jumping off a bridge. He may make himself suffer by getting arrested for drunk driving. I mean, there's an infinitude of ways you can do that. So that's what you see in the loser. So I'm forewarning you right now. If you determine that somebody is at level 5, 6, or 7, run for your life, because those people will cause big trouble. You don't want to be around them. So, for example, let's say you have one of these self-destructive types, right? Level 5, right? And he doesn't tell you that he's got drugs on him that he's using to kill himself with. So you get stopped by the cops. They find the drugs on him, and they arrest you too because it's in your car. You see, it's very easy to get in trouble around these people. So that's my advice. Now we come up to level 4, the normal. The normal is exactly what you think it is. It's the normal person. Now, in the United States, which of course I know very well, the normal guy has a wife and a couple of kids, and he has a house with a mortgage and a car with payments, takes a vacation in the summer, he has a regular job, he's normal. Now, the objective of the normal is conformity. Now, some people will say, well, that's not a good thing. But think about this. The normal does not want to rock the boat. He does not want to create any disturbance. He wants everything to go along nice. So that's what I mean by conformity. So this is the type of guy, when everybody shaves their head, he'll shave his head. When everybody grows a mustache, he grows a mustache. When mustaches go out of vogue, as they did in the 80s, he shaves it off. So he's
like that, has that like a herd mentality. You mean he goes with the rest of the people?
He wants to conform, yes. Now, what he conforms with depends on his life. So, for example, let's say he belongs to a bowling team, right? There's 6 guys on the bowling team, and all of these guys go out and buy special jackets that have the name of the bowling team, right? He's not required to do that, but he will do it because the other 5 guys did it, because he wants to conform. And now here's what you have to realize about the normal. They don't want to hurt anybody, and they don't want to help anybody. Don't think you're going to recruit this guy for your cause, no matter how good the cause is. And also, this is not somebody who really wants to do any harm. He just wants to live his life and not rock the boat. Okay, that's 30% of the population, the largest demographic group on this scale. Up from that is the winner. Now, the objective of the winner is wealth. The winner wants to win. Money is how we keep score. So it doesn't really have to be currency. There are many ways of wealth. For example, if it's an actor, he wants to have an Oscar or an Emmy that he can put on his mantle for the rest of his life. Or if he's a baseball player, he wants to have a World Series ring, because for the rest of his life, he's got that ring, and he can always say, I was a World Series champ. That's wealth. Believe me, I was into baseball. I played amateur baseball. Every baseball player in the world, that's his dream, to have a World Series ring. And there are some of the greatest players in the world who are in the record books for the top statistics who never got a World Series ring. See? That wealth eluded them. Yes, they made $100 million, but they didn't get that ring. So that's why if you listen to athletes, they often will tell you, well, you have so much money, why are you still playing? I want to win a championship. I want to win the Super Bowl. See, it's about winning. So this is a person, if he does not win, he's not happy. Doesn't matter what it is. Let's say you play tennis with some friend of yours. Let's go and play tennis. Okay, right? And he loses. He is not going to be happy. He is going to be bummed out. Now, a lot of people would say, well, there's no money involved. Okay, you win. Next time I'll win. That's not how this guy was. This guy would not be happy about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the ways you can tell the winner. The winner really wants to win. It doesn't matter what it is. You could be in a card game with him, and you can see he wins a hand, he collects his chips. Oh boy, is he happy. More so than the other people at the table. See? The other people at the table, they just take their chips. Okay, this guy is beaming from ear to ear with a big smile because he won. That's the winner. Now, up from that, level 2 is the leader. The purpose of the leader is conquest. Now, some people can say, well, if you're winning, isn't that conquest? No. There's a big difference. It's a very different mindset. And I'll give you an example. Abraham Lincoln was at level 2. His goal was conquest. He was determined to conquer the Confederacy. He had very little help. His cabinet wouldn't help him. His generals wouldn't fight for him because they were not at this level. And he discovered an obscure general named Grant. And Grant was not well thought of. He drank. He was not tall or handsome. He didn't really look like a general. And, a lot of generals tried to get rid of Grant. And Lincoln said to them, one of the most famous quotes in American history, he said, I cannot spare this man. He fights. Grant would fight. So eventually he put Grant in charge of the whole army, and that's how he won the war. But there were a lot of other generals, they didn't want to conquer. See, they wanted to win. This is the type of guy in the military. You know what's important to him? He gets promoted. He's a major general, and then he wants to be lieutenant general. So they're winning, you see, by doing that. So a guy's a colonel. What's important to him? He wants to be a general. That's winning. That's not conquering. So the difference is the leader is down for the struggle. Mm-hmm. Most leaders have terrible things happen to him. Abraham Lincoln was shot in the head. Alexander Hamilton, also at level 2, was killed by a political opponent. This is what happens to leaders because they don't back down. They have courage and they are going to conquer unless you kill them. That's what they're about. Alexander the Great is a perfect example of this. Okay, so up from that is the saint, which we talked a little bit about. The saint wants to transcend. He is really above all of this. Now, how he discusses it or explains it to you depends on his religious beliefs. So if you talk to a Christian who's a saint, he'll tell you he wants to die and go to heaven and become an angel. That's his idea of transcendence. If you talk to a Buddhist, he will say he wants to attain nirvana. But they're still transcendent. Now, there are transcendent people, meaning saints, who don't belong to any religion. That's actually more popular now than it ever was. There are a lot of people around now who, if you talk to them, you'll see they're very spiritual, but they don't belong to any religion. So they want to transcend. Now, how they explain it, how they think about it, one guy might say, well, I want to resolve my karma, which is a Hindu concept. So that's what the saint is about. Okay, any questions before I go on?
Oh, yes. So just about saint. Is there any other saint but Jesus Christ and Buddha? Do we have any
Sure.
example like in the modern history or something? Like just
Absolutely. Gandhi was a saint.
Mhm.
Yogananda, who spent
Mhm.
most of his life in the United States, was a saint. I knew some saints. I had a Catholic education, and I knew a couple of Catholic priests who were saints. Now, at the time, I did not know the scale, so I did not label them that way. But I knew when I looked at these men, they were not normal people. These guys were just overflowing with love. And when I say love, I mean kindness, compassion, benevolence. You know, they were beautiful people. And then later on, I realized, they were saints. That's what like this. So, yeah, there's plenty of them around. And a lot of them you will find, as I said, in ashrams and monasteries. They join religious orders, you know. Now, I'm not saying everybody in these religious orders is a saint. It's different. You know, like, for example, the Society of Jesus, which is the largest religious order in the world that's only men. They have 16,000 members. They've been around about 400 years. And I know Jesuits, and a lot of those guys are saints. They don't care about anything else. They want to transcend. And again, since they're Catholics, they're going to say, well, they aspire to go to heaven and become an angel. So there are lots of those people around, and if you know what you're looking for, you can see them. You know, there's these saints that I knew who were Catholic priests. When they walked, it almost seemed like their feet didn't touch the ground. I mean, obviously they did, but that's sort of the impression you got. You could almost see the halo. If you looked at them with your third eye, meaning in an extrasensory way, you could see the halo. So they're around. Most of them are
Okay.
very low key. They don't want fame. They don't want money. They don't want power. And so, you know, it's not like you're going to find them on the internet. You know, you might find one, but generally, you know, they're very low key people. That's why most of them will go and join an ashram and meditate or pray. You know, that's what they do. And most of them do
Okay.
works of kindness. You know, they're missionaries or whatever. Okay?
Yes. Yeah.
So let me go
Understood.
on now. Okay, so at level 4, there's a
Going up.
horizontal line. It's above it is social, below it is antisocial. So the most social you can be is a saint.
Mhm.
And a leader is a little less social And a winner is less social than that, but he's still social. When you get to the normal is not social or antisocial. He's just really neutral.
Mhm.
And then when you go across into antisocial, the loser is antisocial, but he's not as antisocial as the criminal. See, he's not going to rob a bank. And then you get down to the subversive, and they're as antisocial as you can get. They kill people or do things as bad as killing people. So that's the social and antisocial aspect. Now, the dotted vertical line is what I call the axis. That defines what the scale is measuring. In other words, when you have a scale, you have to say what it's measuring. Like, for example, if I give you a yardstick, right? And in the United States, we use imperial measurement, and it's going to say 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inches, 4, right? That's what it's measuring. But in Europe, they use a meter stick. And so it's marked differently,
Metric.
see? So you have to ask the question, and again, that goes into the mathematics of this when I was constructing this. What is this scale measuring? See, what are we measuring with this scale? We have 7 levels. 7 levels of what? So now I'm going to tell you. Notice at the saint, it says courage, wisdom, and ethics. At the first of it says fear, stupidity, and criminality. Well, those are antonyms. The opposite of courage is fear. The opposite of wisdom is stupidity. And the opposite of ethics is criminality. So what do you get from somebody at level 7 like Pol Pot or Charles Manson is another example? You get fear, stupidity, and criminality.
Mhm.
What do you get from Jesus or St. Paul? You get courage, wisdom, and ethics.
Wisdom and ethic, yeah.
Yeah. So, in other words, this thing, courage, wisdom, ethics, it's one thing. And now, in order to express it in English, I had to use these 3 words because we don't have a single word that combines all these things. But that one thing is what this is measuring. So as you go down, there's less courage, less wisdom, and less ethics, and
Yep.
more fear, more stupidity, and more criminality. So, if you get to say a normal has, he doesn't have a lot of courage, but he's also not terribly fearful. He's not particularly stupid, but he also is not really wise. And
Yeah.
he has some ethics, but he's not a criminal, So this is a gradient. You go up, and that tells you a lot. So if you can find somebody who's high on the scale, that person is a good person to have in your life because they will manifest courage, wisdom, and ethics. And as I said, it's one thing, even though I have to use 3 words to say it. Now, the next thing, to the right, you notice it says superhuman, line, human, line, subhuman. So people at level 1 and 2 are superhuman, meaning they have abilities and powers that most of us are never going to have no matter what we do. So Jesus is a perfect example, of raising the dead and curing the sick and turning water into wine. Obviously, those are superhuman things. Then you get to the leader. I mean, if you look at what Alexander did, he was 28, a young man when he conquered the world. And if you study his conquests, it's unbelievable.
Right.
Unbelievable. I mean, he would go up against an army that had 4 times as many people and win. That's superhuman. There's a wonderful story about him that's worth mentioning. When he fought the Persians had a huge army. But Alexander's fame had preceded him because by the time he got to Persia, he had been conquering the world, so everybody knew who he was.
Yeah.
So 3 generals of the Persians said, we're going to lose, so let's go over to Alexander, tell him what we know to help him win, and then we will be saved. So they did that. They came over. We would call them defectors. So they defected from the Persians to the Macedonians, and said, this is how many horses they have, this is where they keep them, and so forth. Told them everything they know. And Alexander used that to defeat the Persians, who were a superior force. Then he says, bring me those 3 generals, and he had them all killed. Well, they said, wait a minute, we helped you win. Why? He said, if you betrayed your people once, you would betray us. And I'm not going to give you that chance.
Yeah.
See? That's what a leader would do. See? A saint wouldn't do that. So that just shows Alexander was a man of great courage, wisdom, and ethics. Not as much as Jesus or Yogananda, but still, he performed miracles. And there are many examples of this. I mean, what Lincoln did with the Civil War, most people in the United States and elsewhere thought that what he was trying to do was impossible. They said, you cannot preserve the Union and end slavery. That's why the war was fought. But he did it. He preserved the Union and he ended slavery. That's superhuman. And the challenges, I've studied this man a great deal, the challenges that were presented that very few people could have dealt with what he had to deal with. He kept sending out generals to fight, and they wouldn't fight. This went on for 3 years until he found Grant. So what he did in preserving the Union and ending slavery was superhuman. Because in case some of you don't know, one of the last things Lincoln ever did was he pushed through the 13th Amendment, which made slavery unconstitutional in the United States. In other words, that was the end of it. It's not going to come back. And that was him. It's very well documented that he went to these various people in the Congress and he cut deals with them to get that vote. So that was all Lincoln. Truly a superhuman. Then when you go down across that line, you get into the human man. This is most of us. We're either winners, normals, or losers. So we understand these people. You know, we see that we have somebody who accrues great wealth during his lifetime. You know, he's a winner. He's not a normal person. You know, if you look at somebody like Andrew Carnegie had nothing. And he became the richest man in the world. But he was still a human. He was not a superhuman. And then, of course, the loser, there's all kinds of stories about that, of people who destroy themselves. It's in the newspapers every day or on the internet. You hear these stories about people who destroy themselves. And in every case, and I pay attention to this, these people could easily have stepped aside from that.
Yeah.
They could have gotten out of it. And they could have gone to Alcoholics Anonymous. They could have gone to the Betty Ford Center. They could have gone to Weight Watchers to lose 200 pounds. But they didn't. They made themselves suffer. So that's the human man. Below that is the subhuman. Now, the subhuman is a criminal or a subversive. These people cause most of the trouble on earth. So, for example, Stalin was a criminal and Hitler was a subversive. Now, if you study the history of these people, which I did, most people don't know. Stalin, before World War II, was a bank robber. That's a criminal. So, that's the two categories there. So this is very real. Now, the reason I put this in there is it's easier to spot somebody as a subhuman than it is to spot his specific level or to spot him as a human. So you look at a person and you can say, this guy's a superhuman. And I'm not going to mention any names, but there are persons in our society who are like, unbelievable. How did they do these things? And if you really study them, you find out the guys are superhuman. See, well, that is a clue. Those three categories is like a bracket.
Yeah.
You can look at this guy and say, I don't know what this guy's at, level this guy's up on. He's a subhuman. You know, like if you meet some guy who's in the Russian mob, who kills people for a living and is a drug dealer, he's a subhuman. Normal people don't do that.
Yeah.
So, is he a criminal or subversive? Well, that's a more subtle thing. You need more data to figure that out. You know, it was not obvious to me that Stalin was a criminal and Hitler was a subversive until I really looked into it. And, you know, because it's fairly well known that Stalin killed more people than Hitler did.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it doesn't.
I think it's
But
true.
he wasn't
Yeah.
destructive. He wasn't destructive. He was just somebody who said, "Okay, this guy's a problem. Kill him." You know, that's not as crazy as Hitler wanted to wipe out all the Jews. That's
Yeah.
destructive. Now, you know, he said the Jews were responsible for all Germany's ills, which of course is ridiculous. But, you know, the truth is, even if there were some Jews who were responsible for some of Germany's ills, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that most of them were not. Most
Oh,
of them
yeah.
were regular people making a living, you know, taking care of their families.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Right.
So, you know, that's what you get from a subversive or like Pol Pot. He virtually wiped out the intelligentsia of Cambodia. If you
Yeah.
had a college degree, he killed you. That's destructive. See, that's not selective. You know, like in the mafia, they're at level 6. There are certain people, they say, look, this guy's a problem. We got to get rid of him. They kill him. That's selective. You
Yeah.
see? So that's different from the subversive. So any questions?
Okay. No, I pretty much thank you for such a comprehensive explanation on every